As we grow and evolve, our skills develop and allow us to accomplish various different tasks that we struggled with at a young age. Video games are no exception to this, as from a young age I played video games throughout my childhood, and to this day I have very fond memories of doing so. Naturally, starting out I sucked at video games, but as I played on and got older, I became better at video games, and those skills have made it so that I can play and tackle various different video games and their challenges with ease. That being said, there were certain moments in video games that really tested my patience and pushed me over the edge of what I could handle at that age. They were vicious, they were long, they were blood pumping, teeth grinding, controller smashing, rage inducing, hair pulling, kick to the crotch moments of pure frustration and anger that have haunted me all these years and have become the banes of my childhood. These were the moments where the games I played suddenly decided, hey, it looks like you're having a lot of fun. Stop that, now deal with these teeth grinding sections for the next 2 months. These particular moments were the moments where I just couldn't beat these challenges for the longest time, and every attempt ended in soul-crushing failure, to the point in which I had to be pulled away from the TV to prevent me from throwing it out the damn window. These moments have drilled their way into my memories for all the wrong reasons, and have scarred me for life, and now it's time to battle these inner demons and finally put my mind at ease. This list is not going to be pretty, people, since I imagine some of you may recognise these moments, and I apologise in advance if I just so happen to bring up some painful memories during this video. And be warned everyone, there will be anger, hatred, screaming and blood, but there's no turning back now, so join me as I count down the top 10 banes of my childhood. Just a few quick notices before we begin as always. Firstly, this list is purely based on the moments that frustrated me as a child, since some of these moments I've got no problem tackling today because I'm just so much better at video games, but back then, oh man, back then these moments were like trying to fight the devil himself while at the same time trying to perform heart surgery and program a space shuttle in high heels. Secondly, is that the one game, or in this case one moment per franchise rule, is sort of 50-50 in this countdown. Since while I won't include more than one moment from a main series game, I will be including additional moments from spin-off games. For example, if I had one moment from a Rayman game on here, then I could also have one moment from a spin-off Rayman game as well. Thirdly, I'm only including the moments I played as a child, since there are some moments from other video games that are infamous for being incredibly frustrating and scarring many kids for life, but they probably won't be on here because I just didn't play them. At least not back then, since there are some games I played recently where if I played them as a child would have sent me to a mental institute. Isn't that right, F-Zero GX? And with all that cleared up, it's time to take a trip down memory lane, but instead of sunshine and rainbows, there's nothing but pain and misery to come, and you'll want to die by the end of this.
But I know that you do not fear death. Your punishment must be more severe. So you can watch me relive this torture, and when you have truly understand the depths of my pain, when the comment section is nothing but ashes, then you have my permission to die.
You know, Naughty Dog has got to be one of the greatest video game companies ever. I mean, in my eyes, they have yet to make a bad game, and they're responsible for having some of the best games on each PlayStation system. There's the Crash Bandicoot games on PS1, the Uncharted series on PS3, The Last of Us on both PS3 and PS4, not to mention, of course, the Jak and Daxter series on the PlayStation 2. Now, the first Jak and Daxter game was a very well made, if somewhat generic 3D platformer, but it was still a fantastic game regardless. It wasn't until the sequel Jak 2 Renegade where the series really begun to make a name for itself and establish its true identity. Now, Jak 2 pretty much took the original game and made everything about it much darker and much bigger. The story was darker, the levels were bigger, the combat was bigger, the world was bigger, the characters were darker, the bosses were both bigger and darker, and the game as a whole was harder. Much harder. Yeah, Jak 2 is infamous for being one of the most frustrating platformers ever, and this is mainly due to the various missions you get which demand so much from you, and it's so easy for you to lose. And by far the mission which frustrated me the most was the goddamn arrow race. You know we're in for some shit when this race from hell is only at number 10. Players of Jak 2 know just how bad the arrow race is and the amount of controllers it smashed. I mean, there were a lot of missions in Jak 2 that made me rage and want to break the damn game, but this one is easily the worst of it. Now the Errol race, as the name suggests, is a mission where you must race against Errol around the city while passing through green rings in order to prove which of the two has the bigger dick. Sounds easy, right? Well, it would be, if it weren't for the fact that this race is utter bullshit! Man, where do I begin with this mission? Okay, first of all, while passing through the rings doesn't sound too bad, the catch is that if you miss a single ring, the mission is over and you fail, and during the middle of the race this rule really bites you in the ass hard, since some of the rings are placed so close together that making sharp turns and getting around corners and passing through the rings at the same time becomes a nightmare. This leads into my second point, which is that the race takes place inside Haven City, and nothing about it changes to accommodate the fact that you're having a race, since none of the other vehicles disappear, which means it's very easy to crash into them and either come to a screeching halt or worse, get blown up. And towards the end of the race, you have to traverse through some of the sharpest turns this side of F-Zero, and it's not pretty, I'll tell you that much. Thirdly, there's the AI, but that's kind of 50-50, since most of the time, Errol goes through the rings without stopping or slowing down, so you pretty much end up racing perfection, but there are moments where Errol can get stuck for a bit, or you can crash into him and throw him off, but again, it's 50-50. Finally, and by far the worst thing about this race, is that it's so damn long. I mean, you have to race all the way from Cruise Bar to the Coliseum, and the race itself goes on for far too long, and it ends up being your biggest enemy since it wears on you and you eventually slip up as a result. I thought races were meant to be short bursts of fast-paced action, not long and drawn-out clusterfucks of frustration and tediousness. I've already got the first part of Radiant Dawn for that, thank you very much. All of these factors cause what should have been a challenging but overall manageable and fun race to a drawn-out game of chance and just hoping that none of the above factors screw you over. The only reason this isn't any higher is that it didn't take too long for me to beat Errol in the end, especially compared to how long some of the other moments took in this countdown. The Errol race is one of the most infamous moments of Jak 2, and for me was the most infamous moment in the game. While yes, there are other moments which are arguably just as, if not more frustrating, I've always found the Errol race to be the worst of them all, because even if you somehow manage to get ahead of Errol, sooner or later something will catch you off guard and screw you over. If it's not Errol's AI, then it's the sharp turn. And if it's not that, then it's the other drivers. And if it's not that, well then you just happen to be one lucky motherfucker. As I mentioned in the second episode of Free For All, unlike most people, I grew up the Sonic Adventure series rather than the 16-bit Mega Drive games. And truth be told, Sonic Adventure never frustrated me to the point in which I wanted to roast that hedgehog on a spit with foxtails on the side, along with a healthy dose of Eggman salad and a Knuckles enchilada. Sonic Adventure 2 was a completely different story, since there were a lot of times where I really had a tough time not trying to impale Sonic in the back due to the frustration he gave me. Suddenly Sonic 06 makes a lot more sense in retrospect. Now, when most people think of frustrating moments in Sonic Adventure 2, they think of things like trying to clear the hard mode of certain levels, mad space, getting all the A ranks, mad space, doing the race car levels without hitting the cars or walls, mad space, and of course there's the issue of mad space, but the less said about that level the better. Now these are all valid examples, but they never became banes for me since they were mostly to do with stuff in the post game. And the true bane of Sonic Adventure 2 came right at the end of the main game with that motherfucking ultimate abomination that is the Bio-Lizard. I can't believe out of all the things that have frustrated me in a Sonic game, the worst offender is a boss fight of all things, since the Sonic the Hedgehog series isn't exactly known for having, well, difficult boss fights. But this thing, holy shit, this thing was such a nightmare for my 10-year-old self, and ever since facing that thing, nothing in any other Sonic game has even come close to the grief this fuckface has given me. Yeah, not even games as frustrating as Sonic Heroes and Secret Rings for that matter. Now I bet you're all thinking, oh come on, the Bio-Lizard isn't that bad. Sure, it can be challenging, but nothing that would cause you to rage quit. God, you're such a drama queen. While yes, I'll admit nowadays I don't have a problem with the Bio-Lizard, and I actually rather enjoy fighting him from time to time. But back then, this thing was a literal monster, and thanks to it I saw the game over screen more times than I'm comfortable with. Now the fight with the Bio-Lizard doesn't start off bad. The Bio-Lizard circles around the ring while trying to either bite you or tail whip you, and after a while it stops to catch its breath, at which point you grind on the rail across its neck and attack its life support system. Now the Bio-Lizard repeats this process, but adds new attacks into the mix like shooting homing orbs or shooting shadow balls at you. What is the Bio-Lizard, a Pokemon? If so, where can I find one with perfect IVs and a modest nature? Also, if possible, can it be shiny? Getting back on track, while the fight doesn't seem too hard at first, most of the time you'll get caught off guard by the Bio-Lizard's attacks and end up losing what little rings you had, which is especially bad with the homing orbs, which knock you so far back it's pretty much impossible to get your rings back at that point. Then of course there's the issue of when the Bio-Lizard gets on his last sliver of health and suddenly is able to defy gravity, as you are helplessly floating towards him and being shot at the same time. And let's just say that dying here after getting so close to killing him wasn't good for my 10-year-old self, especially my vocal cords. But the most frustrating part of the fight and the thing that caused most of my deaths was the fucking water. Of course, being a Sonic game, the biggest hazard is going to be water, but here, oh man, here is where you will hate the fact that for some stupid reason neither hedgehog can swim. While circling the ring, you'll notice that there is a stream of water flowing from the top of the shrine all the way down to the bottom, with two channels dividing the ring in half and letting the water flow. Now as you run around the ring, you'll have to make sure to jump over them, otherwise the lizard will catch up to you. Now for the channel closer to the shrine, it's perfectly fine since you simply have to jump out again, but the channel at the bottom will kill you if you don't jump out the very second you fall in, since the current will drag you out of the ring. And considering you're playing as the otherwise fastest character in the game and are constantly moving in order to avoid being eaten, this fucking pitfall will be the reason you see that game over screen so much. While this fight isn't nearly so hard these days, back when my skills were mediocre at best and my reaction time wasn't exactly the stuff of kings, this boss fight was the biggest hurdle I've ever had to face in a Sonic game, and it really made me question if Shadow really was the ultimate life form considering how much he died. The Sonic the Hedgehog series has been around for 25 years and it has brought us many frustrating moments with it. Some people say the Emerald stages in Sonic Heroes are the worst. Some people say it's the ball puzzle from Sonic 06. Some say it's some of the missions from Secret Rings or Eggman Land from Sonic Unleashed. But the Bio-Lizard from Sonic Adventure 2 was the moment that made me want to bury Sonic alive long before Sega did the job for me, and was by far the most infuriating and downright soul-crushing thing to come out of any Sonic game. Or at least any good Sonic game. The Nintendo 64 was the first console I ever owned, and I have a lot of nostalgic memories because of it. Now I played many games on the N64, and one of my favourites was Rareware's magnum opus, Banjo-Kazooie. Often regarded as one of the best 3D platformers and games on the N64, Banjo-Kazooie is a game I have very fond memories of playing, and to this day I still love to pop in this baby and play it. Now as much as I love the game, I will admit, after Gobi's Valley and Freezeezy Peak, the levels in Banjo-Kazooie become much worse and the last third of the game can become a bit mature. Now granted, this is just my opinion, but personally I'm not a fan of the last three levels, those being Mad Monster Mansion, Click Clock Wood, and by far the worst of them all, Rusty Ball Busting Brutal Beastly Bleak Bucket Bay. That's nice alliteration, huh? Rusty Bucket Bay, why do you otherwise tarnish the pristine gem that is Banjo-Kazooie? I mean, yeah, the game isn't perfect, and there are other bad levels in the game, but you are by far the worst of it, and are the one level no one likes tackling. Unless you're a masochist, but I don't fall into that category, otherwise the Rajang would be one of my favourite monsters. You'd think a level this bad would be filled with terrible design choices, unfair challenges and otherwise cheap and unforgiving enemy placement. Well, truth be told, that's not the case, since the level is, for the most part, decently designed and otherwise competent and all around solid. There are just two things that hurt this level, and I mean really hurt this level. So much so that many players hate this level because of these two factors alone, one of which can stop people from playing the game entirely. Yeah, it's that bad. First off is the fact that the water in this level is oily water, and it will drain your oxygen meter twice as fast as normal. And what's worse is that simply coming back up for air won't work. You have to climb out of the water and make it back on land before being able to safely breathe again. So if you ever find yourself far away from a ladder, well, sorry to say, but you're fucked. Now this in itself isn't too bad, but it can catch you off guard a lot of the time and royally screw you over, especially when trying to get certain collectibles. In particular, one Jiggy that is only accessible by going through the dreaded engine room. And this leads to by far the worst part of the game, the bloody engine room. Yeah, I bet all of you that have played Banjo-Kazooie are experiencing post-traumatic stress right now. Well, you're not the only one here because yes, this section is just the worst. Now why this room is so bad is that because in order to get a certain Jiggy, You have to activate a switch and run all the way back and swim into the propellers that have stopped moving. The biggest problem in this scenario is the rotating fans. These fans are some of the most deceiving obstacles in any video game, since they don't seem too bad at first glance, but the very second they start moving, the fan blades will knock you back if so much as a pixel of Banjo touches them. And even worse is that if you try to move along the beams while the blades are spinning, and even if they've just started moving, you will slip off and fall into the abyss, causing you to die and restart the level again, forcing you to collect all those notes scattered across the level over and over and over again. I mean, I've heard of dickhead moments in certain sections of otherwise great games, but this takes the fucking piss, since more often than not, the window of time between the blade stopping and starting again catches you off guard, and just the process of going through all that monotony just to collect the last couple of notes and get the final jiggy is way more hassle than it's worth, and can very often cause players to stop playing the game entirely. While I love Banjo-Kazooie to this day, and I still think it's one of the best 3D platformers, I will never overlook Rusty Bucket Bay and just how bad it is. Sure, the entire level isn't terrible, but the bits that are bad are just awful, and bring out the worst aspects of the game and then some. I'm sorry Rusty Bucket Bay, but once again I'm taking a leaf out of the Radiant Hero Ike's book, because you'll get no sympathy from me. Truth be told, I've never been a fan of sports games. I've got nothing against them, they're just not really my cup of tea. Mario sports games are a completely different story though, since those games are easy to play, as well as being really over the top and ridiculous fun that you forget you're doing such mundane tasks as playing golf. Now I played a lot of Mario sports games on the GameCube like Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, Power Tennis and Smash Football. I didn't play many Mario sports games on the Wii, but my favourite one was easily Mario Strikers Charge. Mario Strikers Charge is one of the best Mario sports games ever made, thanks to the online, the multiplayer, and the single player was a lot of fun as well, since I had a fun time conquering all the cups that the game had to offer. No, sorry, I lied. I enjoyed 2 of the cups the game had to offer, because the Striker Cup can go fuck itself. Man, it's a good thing Mario Strikers Charge is a game that encourages aggressive and otherwise violent behaviour during matches, because otherwise I'd have to vent my frustration elsewhere, and my house only has so many windows. The Striker Cup from Mario Strikers Charge is a horrible case of this game suddenly having a difficulty spike. You know those moments where the difficulty jumps up in spades and the player often isn't ready for the challenges ahead? Yeah? Well, my body certainly wasn't ready for this one, since the Striker Cup was so damn difficult, and most of the time it wasn't down to the CPU being better than me. That would be much more tolerable, and would actually encourage me to become a better player. No, you see, a lot of the time, the frustration factor was due to nothing but luck on the CPU side, which made it so much worse. The Striker Cup from Mario Strikers Charge is the final cup of the otherwise campaign or tournament mode, and naturally it's the hardest cup in the game. However, it's not hard in the sense that the difficulty is scaled along with the rest of the game. Instead, the game goes from level 4 to level 9 on the difficulty scale so quickly that by the first match you'll be down 5 goals in a minute or so. Now granted, this wasn't too big of an issue, since for me it taught me some tricks that the AI uses, and just beating them normally wasn't too bad. The problem was that for some reason the game was out for my blood. I don't know why exactly, maybe it didn't like the fact that in the future I was going to badmouth the Tigrex, and always gave me the shittiest luck when outside factors like items and such were involved. I swear, the CPU always got items like a star and a chain chomp whenever possible, and often these would cause my entire team to be knocked aside, allowing them to pull off a Mega Strike that always landed perfectly, mind you, and trying to stop them with the Wii Remote isn't easy, especially if the sensitivity is just a little bit off, trust me. And even when I beat every one of them and made it to the final, the worst was yet to come, because the match against P.T. Piranha was just hell on earth, with lightning bolts. Everything bad about the previous matches was made so much worse here. The AI was at its best and most brutal, the luck factor was complete bullshit and screwed me over at every turn, and for the love of Rosalina, the stadium was out to get me and made sure I never won the match. This was because the stadium you face PT in is exclusive to that match, and lightning bolts come down and spread throughout the pitch. Now dodging the lightning wasn't too hard when I was controlling whichever character I was at the time, but my teammates would run into the lightning and get fried, and the opposing team never got hit by it. And if you lose the match, which I did, a lot, you have to do the entire thing all over again. Mamma mia, was this part of the game brutal and unforgiving? I mean, Mario Striker's charge was no cakewalk to begin with, but for God's sake, the spike in difficulty at the final cup is just obnoxious, and the game does everything to make sure that you won't win, no matter how bullshit or luck-based the factors surrounding each match are. Needless to say, I was overjoyed when I finally beat that fucking plant and won the cup with Bowser, since now I can focus on the missions, multiplayer and the online mode, because if you think for a second I was going to put myself through all that torture all over again, well guess what? I did. Because I thought beating the cups of every captain would unlock something, which it didn't. God, what a waste of time that was. Kinda like a certain other Mario game. Don't worry, I'll get to you soon enough. When most people think of party games, games like Mario Party and WarioWare come to mind since they're some of the best ones out there. While that's fair enough and perfectly understandable, one of my favourite party games was and always has been Crash Bash. Man, I don't think I played any other game on the PS1 as much as this one, especially in regards to multiplayer, since Crash Bash was such a fun game to me, and the minigames, while rather limited, were a lot more complex and in-depth than stuff you see in Mario Party. While the multiplayer was the best part of Crash Bash, I still had fun in the single player, going through all the minigames to collect trophies and fight bosses in order to get to new warp rooms and play new and exciting minigames. Well, mostly exciting. Now, while collecting the trophies was perfectly manageable, in order to reach the third warp room and every one after that, you had to collect the gems and the crystals by replaying the games again, only with different conditions like beating it in a short amount of time for gems and having specific handicaps for crystals. Some of these challenges weren't much harder than doing it normally, and then there were other challenges that could FUCK right off! Why are some of the most addictive games also some of the most frustrating ones? I mean, it's like the developers think to themselves, okay, now that we've got your attention, let's make their lives miserable since they won't stop playing regardless. Ha 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 ha. Well, sorry to say, but I'm not that narrow-minded these days when it comes to frustrating but addictive video games. Most of the time, fuck you competitive Smash players, you take the fun out of everything! Sadly, my younger self wasn't so open-minded, and thus no matter how hard the challenge or how frustrating it was, I wouldn't stop until I beat it or my parents took the controller away from me, whichever came first. Crash Bash was one of the worst cases of this, since because I found the game to be so addictive, some of the Crystal and Emerald challenges, despite being some of the most unfair and unbalanced minigames this side of the original Mario Party, I just wouldn't stop playing them because of my stubbornness, which resulted in many days spent tackling the same godforsaken minigames over and over again, to the point at which I'm really glad my parents took the controller away from my hands, otherwise I'd have a terrible case of arthritis. When it comes to collecting gems and crystals in Crash Bash, most of the time it's 50-50 since some of them are fine and I can do them on the first try, but others took well over 9,000 tries, no I'm not going there, and half the time you swear the developers never tested these challenges since a good chunk of them were incredibly unbalanced and your only chance of winning them was when there was a blue moon and the planets aligned themselves. Now I can't name all the challenges that frustrated me, or we'd be here until Fire Emblem Fates comes out in Europe, #dammit Nintendo. But in order for you to get a general idea, I'll list some examples. First, there was collecting gems in the tank level since you have to defeat all 3 opponents with only 40 seconds, and considering it takes a good chunk of time to kill a single tank unless you're incredibly lucky with the mines, getting rid of one of these tanks was about all I could manage most of the time, so trying to get all 3 of them within the time limit was fucking bullshit. Second was the Pogo Panic Crystal Challenge, where you had to avoid mushrooms that sprouted at random, and most of the time they spawned directly in front of me, and before I had time to change direction, boom, I lost. And there were so many mushrooms that spawned it really limited how I could move about the board. There were many more challenges like this, and they were either impossible to win without getting extremely lucky, or hoping the AI suddenly went brain dead, which doesn't happen very often unfortunately. Crash Bash is a game I still have lots of fun with to this day, but it's mainly for the multiplayer only, because for the love of all that is sacred, I don't want to go through some of those minigames ever again. Would I have the easier time than before? Most likely. Will it take over a million tries? Hopefully not. Am I willing to take that risk? Hell fucking no, I've dealt with enough of this game's bullshit to last me a lifetime. And besides, I've already got another game that eats up hours of my time and causes me a lot of frustration even though I love the game. It's called Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, and it's not nearly as frustrating as the shit you pulled off, Crash Bash. Well, almost. Super Mario Sunshine is in a very grey area when it comes to people's opinions about the game. Some people think it's the best Mario game ever, some people think it's the worst Mario game ever, and others just say, eh. Personally, I think Some Call Me Johnny perfectly summarised my feelings towards the game. The main adventure's a great time, but the rest of it just sucks balls. Since going through the levels and collecting the Shine Sprites in order to get to the fight with Bowser was such a wonderful time, and this part of the journey is some of the most fun I've had in any 3D Mario game. Now while it was fun, it wasn't exactly easy since I feel that to this day, Super Mario Sunshine is the hardest 3D Mario game I've ever played. Yes, even more than Super Mario Galaxy 2. The perfect run isn't that hard, you know. There were many difficult moments in Mario Sunshine that really tested my patience with the game, like trying to collect all those red coins while blooper surfing, doing that godforsaken pachinko challenge, that fucking manta ray which just never knew when to stop, the bloody watermelon that fell to pieces quicker than Micaiah in Radiant Dawn did, and by far the worst of it all, Corona fucking Mountain. Oh, I hate this level so much. You certainly saved the worst for last, Mario Sunshine. Up until this point, you were frustrating at times, but tolerable and nothing too bad or cheap. But fuck me sideways did you pull out all the stops for Corona Mountain, because this level was otherwise impossible for me to beat, and I went through so many game over screens until I finally beat you. Now while I hate this level so fucking much because of the trauma it caused me, I will admit that only 1/3 of this level is really bad, since the beginning and end of this level are just fine, and the boss battle isn't too bad either. But the middle of the stage is where you literally go straight to the depths of hell, and you'll end up taking a lava bath more times than you would a regular one. Corona Mountain is the final stage in Super Mario Sunshine, and it is split into 3 parts. The first part has you jumping over spikes and fire traps which you must extinguish in order to stand on. This part isn't hard or anything, but if you're too quick or you try to rush, you will die in an instant, so take your time with this. And the third part of the stage has you rocket jumping through the clouds until you reach the top, whereafter you fight Bowser and Bowser Jr. in a hot tub. I don't know, Miyamoto really wanted a bath that day? This part is the easiest bit and really isn't any trouble whatsoever. The middle part of the stage is where the deaths begin, and holy crap they do not stop, because you have to steer a boat across a river of lava while trying to avoid giant pillars. Now this would be fine if 1, the boat didn't steer like complete ass and make ridiculously sharp turns just by slightly using FLUDD. 2, if you just so happen to touch the pillars, then the boat crashes and you die. Even if you jump off and land on one of the other pillars, you'll slip off and fall into the lava. 3, the boat trip is the longest part of the level, and this will be the section that causes all of your deaths because it just takes forever to get the boat across the lava. While this is just one part of the level, this one part will make you hate Super Mario Sunshine with a burning passion because much like Rusty Bucket Bay, it emphasizes the worst aspects of Sunshine and the game's physics go against it, causing nothing but frustration and misery. Super Mario Sunshine is an overall great game, but it certainly has moments of either pure frustration or teeth-grinding tediousness, and Corona Mountain is the absolute worst of it all. I mean, it's the final level and it's meant to be hard, and these days this level doesn't give me too much hassle because I'm a more patient player, but back then I hated this level so much as it was actively taunting me into a false sense of hope. At first it's rather easy, but then it punches you and says, fuck you, you're not going anywhere anytime soon. Now give me all those green mushrooms you have, I've got a family to feed. Thank God I had Smash Bros. Mini to play as an alternative, since there was nothing nearly as frustrating in that game than what you pulled off Sunshine. Nope, nothing whatso. Oh no. Oh dear God, no! Super Smash Bros. Melee was easily one of the games that defined my childhood, as it was the game I played the most on the GameCube, and it's probably the game I put the most time into, ever. Now like any video game, Melee was frustrating on the harder difficulties, but not something that made me rage quit. At least until I got to the event matches, where you played various different scenarios with certain win conditions or handicaps, and while a good chunk of them were fun, some of them would skin you alive with just how infuriating they were, and by far the worst of it in my opinion was the final event match in the game, the Showdown. Oh god, no, please. No, please don't do this to me. No, don't do this to me, Mealy. I thought we were friends. Why are you doing this to me? Look, I'm sorry I don't wave dash or play as Sheik, but I don't play competitive Smash. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry about that. I had a sudden bit of post-traumatic stress right there. Hey, now don't look at me like that. Samus done it too, you know. Anyway, getting back on topic, coming in at number 4, we have Event Match 51, otherwise known as the Showdown from Super Smash Bros. Melee. Now, up until this point, I've dealt with some pretty annoying event matches. The Trophy Tussle event matches was a case of everyone ganging up on me because why not? Time for a checkup was more like time to check me into the emergency room, and the less said about Trouble King 2, the better. These event matches were certainly hard, but they didn't compare to the frustration which was Event Match 51, because it's not like fighting a level 9 Mewtwo, Ganondorf and Bowser with 3 stocks isn't hard enough. No, let's make it so you're fighting a level 9 Mewtwo, Ganondorf and Giga Bowser, each with 3 stocks, because goddammit Sakurai, as much as I love and respect you, you have a knack for pissing me off to the extreme. So yeah, in Event Match 51 you have to fight against Mewtwo, Ganondorf and Giga Bowser in Final Destination, and they're all level 9. Now, any experienced Smash player would say this challenge isn't anything special, and you can beat it no problem. Which is true these days, I can beat this challenge no problem. But try telling that to my 10-year-old self, who was otherwise a scrub so to speak. At the time, I had never faced a more daunting and demanding challenge, and holy shit did I see that failure screen more times than Fox in Melee tournaments. Now, I've always had trouble dealing with multiple players in Smash Bros. Since I'm more of a one-on-one fighter, and this event match was the worst case scenario for me, since the majority of the time I was so focused on fighting Giga Bowser, since he was the biggest threat and the biggest target, and both Mewtwo and Ganondorf would blindside me and beat the crap out of me, only for Giga Bowser to come back and kill me at a moment's notice. I swear it took me forever to beat this challenge, constantly changing characters and trying different strategies in order to win, and half the time I only got close to winning because either the AI would have a brain fart and commit suicide, which happened a lot with Mewtwo strangely, or I just so happened to get a really good item like a Warp Star or a Pokeball. But it wasn't like I beat the challenge because of skill, but rather the game took pity on me and said, look, just use this item and beat them already, god damn it, I can only handle so many failure screens. Yeah, well those were my thoughts exactly, Mealy, because this was by far the most frustrating event in the Smash Bros series has ever put forth. Yes, there are more difficult events in the new ones, especially in the case of Smash Bros for the Wii U, but now I'm so much better at Smash Bros, and those events don't come close to the rage-filled hatred that Event Match 51 gave me. At this point, my experience with Event Match 51 pretty much went like this.
Damn it, God, motherfucker! Oh, fun! Damn it, dick balls, hairy asshole!
I find that pretty much every gamer, regardless of age, has played a Zelda game at some point, and depending on when they were born, that particular Zelda game helped to define and shape their gaming childhoods. Older gamers have a Link to the Past, younger gamers have a Wind Waker, and those slap bang in the middle have Ocarina of Time. Of course, because I had an N64, I played Ocarina of Time, and yes, it's one of the best Zelda games and all-around video games ever made. That's pretty much a given at this point. But that doesn't mean Ocarina of Time isn't free for some bullshit and tedious moments. Yeah, you all know where this is going. Any player of Ocarina of Time knows the horror and mind-numbing boredom that is the god-forsaken Water Temple. Yeah, I bet this was a big surprise now, wasn't it? At this point, any list concerning worst moments or crappy levels is bound to have the Water Temple from Ocarina of Time in it, and I think it's really a shock that this isn't number 1. Well, as bad as the Water Temple is, it didn't frustrate me as much as the next 2 entries, or even some of the previous ones on this list. But the lack of frustration isn't why I hate the Water Temple, it's the fact that this particular dungeon took me 3 goddamn months to beat on my first time through. Yeah, that's right, 3 months of trial and error, constantly going back and forward and searching for every last key of what seemed like forever is why I hated the Water Temple so much. For those who haven't played the Water Temple, and trust me you're not missing out on much, this temple is infamous for being one of the worst temples in the entire Zelda series. And while I don't think it's the absolute worst, it certainly is a bad temple, and pretty much every gamer has nightmares about experiencing it for the first time. Now the water temple isn't difficult in terms of enemies and such, since it's highly unlikely that you'll die in the water temple. You might lose the will to live, but you won't die. And this is because the water temple is so damn long and confusing, you'll spend far longer than necessary in here and lose track of yourself the moment you step foot into this place. Because there are so many rooms in the water temple and the fact you have to constantly change the water level and switch in and out of the iron boots, this temple wears on you very quickly and you begin to lose sight of which direction you're meant to be going. This was especially bad for my younger self who had a hard enough time clearing the forest and fire temple, so to suddenly be thrown into this godforsaken dungeon was just torture for me. I mean, I dealt with it all, constantly raising and lowering the water level to the point in which I could have just filled Lake Hylia with it, having to find all the keys to open every single damn door in the place, only to find another locked door right afterwards. God, this temple was so tedious for me, and I still can't believe I spent 3 months trying to beat this damn thing. Now these days I've got no problem with the water temple, in fact I can beat it in 45 minutes, no joke. The reason for this is that my friend gave me some advice which really does affect how hard the water temple will be. He said that the water temple is easy, but you have to beat it in one sitting. Trying to beat this temple in multiple sittings is where the real challenge lies, since it's so easy to lose track of which rooms you visited and which direction you're meant to be going that you'll spend most of your time trying to get back to the point where you were making progress before. This is exactly what happened to me since I couldn't beat the water temple in one sitting, and every time I came back to it I just got more and more confused and fumbled around with the game for 3 months until by some miracle I finally made it to the boss and beat his ass in hard. Whether you love or hate Ocarina of Time, the Water Temple was and always will be one of the most infamous and grueling temples ever put into a Zelda game, and for many players growing up with Ocarina of Time, this was the temple that tarnished the otherwise masterpiece of the Zelda series. Thank God Nintendo learned their lesson, since the Water Temples in every future Zelda game weren't nearly as bad as this one, because spending 3 months on a single dungeon is clearly a sign of poor level design. Or maybe back then I just really sucked at video games. Man, I would have hated Monster Hunter if I played it when I was a kid. If you grew up in the 90s, then you had to have played Pokemon, since back then it was a national phenomenon, and growing up around the time when Pokemon was all the rage and practically everywhere, man, good times. Most players' first experience with Pokemon was the original Red and Blue on the Game Boy, aka Pokemon Generation 1, and truth be told, the only thing really frustrating about those games was the first 2 gym leaders depending on which Pokemon you chose as your starter, and trying to catch legendary Pokemon without a Master Ball. Damn it Zapdos, just get in the damn ball already! Well, Generation 1 wasn't my first Pokemon game. It was Gold and Silver, aka Generation 2, and when it comes to frustrating moments in that game, there is only one moment that has broken players and crushed countless hopes and dreams. A single gym leader with the power to destroy all and send you and your Pokemon to the afterlife. Not even Arceus could have prepared you for the horror. That is Whitney! No. Oh god, no, Whitney, please. My Kulava can't take anymore. Oh no. Have mercy on my Pokemon, please. I thought I was going to be the very best like no one ever was. Why did you subject me to such torture? Ugh. Man, these flashbacks are happening way more often than they should. I feel like Samus in Metroid Other M. I guess that means I'm going to need authorization to continue this countdown? Getting back on track, we have quite possibly the hardest and most evil and brutal gym leader in the entire Pokemon series, Whitney. Oh Jesus Christ, I mean Bird Jesus Christ Almighty, Whitney. Easily the most deceptive and unforgiving gym leader out of all the gym leaders, Whitney has become infamous for being the bane of pretty much anyone who's ever played a Pokemon game, and it's all thanks to one particular ace she has that will beat you down so hard, not even consulting the Helix fossil will save you. Whitney is the third gym leader in Pokemon Gold, Silver, Crystal and the remakes, and is the first normal type gym leader in the Pokemon series. Considering the first 2 gym leaders were piss easy unless you chose Chikorita, Whitney seems like nothing special at first, since normal types aren't really a problem to deal with, especially since they're not super effective against anything. When the fight begins, she sends out her Clefairy, which goes down at the drop of a hat, and she's only got 1 Pokemon left. At this point you're thinking to yourself, okay, I got this, I can handle 1 Pokemon, no problem. But then suddenly you're met with the face of the devil himself, as she sends out her Milk Tank. It's back. It just won't leave me alone. It never goes away. It just doesn't stop. Rollout after rollout. It just keeps going. It's drinking its milk. It's stomping on me into submission. It just never ends. It just never ends. Ugh. Once again, I apologize. Man, this countdown really is not doing my mental state any favours. Yes, by far the worst part of the fight is Whitney's level 20 milk tank, which can destroy your entire team thanks to the fact that it can stomp you and make you flinch like nothing else, use milk drink to recover HP, attracts males with attract, and completely sweeps your team with rollout. Whitney is such a huge obstacle in Pokemon Gold and Silver that many players have to grind the shit out of their Pokemon in order to even stand a chance against Whitney. And considering back then the only Pokemon I really used was my starter, Whitney fucked me up. Even years later when I picked up Heart Gold for the DS, Whitney still kicked my ass the first time round despite having multiple well-trained Pokemon, and it was only thanks to the fact that I discovered you could get a Machop that I was able to beat her with ease. To this day, Whitney is a gym leader that players of Pokemon will never forget, and is still the hardest gym leader I've ever battled in any Pokemon game. Hell, I think she's harder than the Elite Four and champions like Red and Cynthia. She may start out cute and innocent, but as soon as she shows her true colours, you'll know what it's like to truly experience fear. And to this day, I can't look at a cow without shuddering. And as such, Whitney, or more accurately Whitney's milk tank, takes the number 2 spot of the banes of my childhood, which just leaves the number 1 entry. Oh man, it's finally time. Time to tackle the number 1 bane of my childhood, and this particular bane belongs to the series that defined my gaming childhood more than any other video game series, Crash motherfucking Bandicoot. The Crash Bandicoot series on the original PlayStation was pretty much my entire childhood when it came to video games, and I have some of the fondest memories of playing these games. That being said, one thing all these games shared that I find myself having trouble with and causing me grief was gem collecting. Now this was the hardest part of any Crash Bandicoot game, and to be fair, in both Crash 2 and Crash 3, gem collecting, while frustrating at times depending on the level in question, was overall more manageable and rewarding. Crash Bandicoot 1 was a completely different story however. This was because unlike 2 and 3, you weren't allowed to die during the level, otherwise you'd have to restart the level from the very beginning every time. And considering this game is the hardest in terms of level design of the original series, gem collecting in this game was a bit of a bitch. In particular, there were 2 stages that broke my spirit and shredded what remaining sanity I had left at that point. These stages were the worst of the worst things my younger self had experienced in any video game. Those being Slippery Climb and No! Hate! All of my hate! Oh, Naughty Dog, I understand that everyone makes mistakes when they're young, and often their older work is outdone by their new stuff, but this is evil! I mean, what were you lot smoking back then? And did you smoke that stuff again when making Jak 2? Because suddenly everything would make a lot more sense in retrospect. Well, getting back to the topic at hand, as reluctant as I am, the greatest bane of my childhood were the most difficult and arguably worst stages in the original Crash Bandicoot. Those being Slippery Climb and, Sunset Vista. Anyone who played the original Crash Bandicoot would know just how teeth-grindingly frustrating these levels are when it comes to gem collecting. Like pretty much every level in the game, by playing through them normally it's just fine, though admittedly Sunset Vista can suck some Bandicoot dick regardless of the gem. But the very second you decide, I feel like going after the gems on these levels, well, good for you. Leave your hope, patience and will to live at the door, because you sure as hell won't find it here. Both of these levels are some of the toughest levels from the design aspect alone to beat normally, and once gem collecting is involved, everything just becomes so much more difficult. And much like Corona Mountain and Rusty Bucket Bay, these levels bring out the worst aspects of the game, and then some. Slippery Climb's biggest problem is that the level requires some very precise platforming across moving platforms, as well as enemies ascending different altitudes. Not to mention a lot of platforms are very narrow, and this level is 90% bottomless pits, so one slip or mistimed jumped and boom, back to the start, bitch. This is made worse by the fact that it often requires split-second jumps in order to reach the next platform and avoid death at the same time. So despite being a level that requires patience, you're going to have to make sure you hurry your ass or you're going to get some spikes up the ass. But as bad as Slippery Climb is, Sunset Vista is a million times worse, since while the game doesn't have nearly as many bottomless pits, it is filled to the brim with blocks that move in and out of the walls, which you must maneuver past in order to proceed, and the patterns on these things can really throw you off with just how random they are, which will catch you off guard and send you plummeting to your doom. And by far the worst part of this level is that it's so long. Holy shit, this level goes on for fucking ever, and by the halfway point you're exhausted from getting past all of the obstacles, and the next half of the game will slit you in the throat the moment you drop your guard. And let me tell you, there is nothing more soul crushing than getting through 3/4 of the stage and then suddenly have to die and start that entire thing all over again. Jesus Christ, how on earth did I manage to do this as a kid without losing my mind? Oh wait, I didn't. It was these two levels that caused the most grief and frustration during my childhood when it came to playing video games, and as much as I want to, I'll never forget the pain, anger, blood, sweat and tears that came with collecting the gems in these levels. Sure, they may not have been as hard as Event Match 51, or as long as the Water Temple, or as tedious as Corona Mountain, but when you look at these levels as a whole, they were by far the biggest banes of my childhood. And do you know what the worst part is? While these days, I can do all of these challenges I've mentioned, no problem whatsoever, and I can clear Slippery Climb in a single run. Hell, I've even grown to like that level for its atmosphere and music. Sunset Vista still gives me shit to this day, and results in me losing God knows how many lives, which is why both Slippery Climb and Sunset Vista from Crash Banjo-Kazooie on the PlayStation 1 take the #1 spot as the biggest bane of my childhood. This has been CRASHX500. I wish you all a great night, take care, and if you'll excuse me, I have to check myself into the psychiatric ward, because I want to make sure I'm in a stable state of mind when Fate comes out, in order to make all those videos everyone wants me to make about it. Because if I don't, then if the mental trauma from these games doesn't kill me, the subscribers certainly will.